I'm also joined with my friend Sergei Sumlany, and we have some breaking news. Unfortunately, because we are talking about the events that are taking place in Ukraine right now, these news uh, are not very much encouraging. Unfortunately, we have information about the Russian missile strike. It was a ballistic strike that took place in Sumy just this morning. And dear friends, please let me know if you can hear us well. I can see that the stream is running. So this morning there was a ballistic missile strike in Sumy. The Russian terrorists hit the city downtown, and Sumy is a city located not really far to the front line. It's basically the bordering city and the bordering region. And it is known that Russians use to strike Sumy, not only the Sumy city itself, but the Sumy Oblast, with artillery on a daily basis. And today there was a ballistic strike. We have reports that we have good sound. Okay, Sergei, good day. Can you tell us a bit more about what happened there?
Hi, and thank you for an opportunity to express this anger and this total disgust on what the Russians have done on this early morning. They have hit Sumy, a regional capital of the Sumy region in Ukraine. The very city center with two ballistic missiles with cluster munition. And today is Palm Sunday in Ukraine, as in the world. This year, the Orthodox and the Catholic Easter take place on the same day. So the Palm Sunday is on the same day. The Catholics, Protestants, and Orthodox, and the Russians have hit exactly the city center in Sumy, which is an ancient city with a lot of old churches in the city center, including the city cathedral, a beautiful one. By the way, I visit Sumer regularly, like each couple of months, and the city center is very vivid. And hundreds of people have gathered in the city center to visit the church, to pray, to get blessing, but also to spend time with their families, as the city center is full of cafes and shops and everything. So the Russians have, as far as we know, the Russians have first sent an observation drone, Orlan, which is a winged drone with a high resolution camera, which the Russians use to observe the area before such ballistic missile strikes. They have clearly seen a number of civilians on the streets, in the streets of Sumy center, and they have hit this area with two ballistic missiles loaded with cluster munition. And cluster munition is exactly what you want to use when you want to kill as much as possible unprotected people, because cluster munition is useless against hard targets, against bunkers or against like buildings, because it contains hundreds and hundreds of small bomblets which get dispersed in the air and explode separately. So it is useless against any target except of weak target, unprotected target, mostly people. And what we know now, at least 31 person is confirmed killed. 83 person at least have confirmed wounded, including 7 children. And on this splice, I want to stress that this is already the second strike of this kind within a week, because the Russians have hit exactly with cluster munition a city Kryvyi Rih in the southeast of Ukraine, and they hit a children playground in a residential area and a restaurant where people were celebrating a birthday. And it happened several days ago. Ukraine has mourned 3 days ago. It was National Mourning Day, because 9 children have been killed, like smashed into pieces on children playground, and the world has done nothing. The world has done nothing to punish Russia, to stop Russia, to retaliate, to reduce Russia's military capacities. And even worse, Steve Witkoff has visited Putin, and he held his palm at his heart, greeting Russian murderous dictator, this genocidal Vladimir Putin. And guess what happened next? Putin felt encouraged and has strike Ukraine again.
This is absolutely crazy, and what pisses me off big time is just how underreported these news are. Because imagine if there is a some kind of terrorist attack in the United States, killing 30 people, 30 plus people, and injuring 80 people. There's almost 100, and we would see that on every mainstream media within like 3 following days, or for example in Europe. But unfortunately, such things happening in Ukraine, they turn into a basically a statistics, and channels don't talk about it. It was unfortunately something absolutely insane to see today in the Telegram channels. There's a lot of footage, also footage published by the Ukrainian rescue service. Here I'm showing a trolley bus that was destroyed. Unfortunately, majority of the people who died, they were in the trolley bus, and there were a lot of kids in there as well. And I don't think that we will see much reports on that in the mainstream media as well. Um, why uh, why doesn't happen? And another thing, recently there was an update about the ambassador, the United States ambassador, who resigned in Ukraine several days ago. There was a lot of criticism towards her, which I completely agree with, when there was this strike on Kryvyi Rih, on the children's playground, and she wasn't even able to name the attacker. And after she named the attacker the next day, because she was the one in the bomb shelter that day, she resigned. Do we see some kind of new trend in the United States that basically forbids the United States officials from calling the Russian invaders the aggressors and terrorists? How do you think?
Well, first, I need to say that I was very positively surprised, as far as I may use this word positively in the current situation. But I was positively surprised by the recent tweet of the CNN TV channel, when they have clearly named Russia as an aggressor, as a murderer, and they have stated very precisely and fact true that Russia has hit city center during the Palm Sunday, and killing people. That was indeed impressive to see such clear wording by the CNN. Although I believe that we have here uh, a sign of internal political fight in the US, as CNN is pretty much unfriendly to Donald Trump and to his team. So I think if the same would have happened under the Biden administration, and such attacks took place under Biden administration, I think that it would not be something so clearly reported by the CNN. But anyway, we have this broadcasting, we have this message, and regarding the ambassador, well, the resignation of the ambassador is a clear sign that you will be fired anyway, independently on how much you want to be in line with Donald Trump's administration, because it is exactly the ambassador who avoided by all costs naming Russia during the missile strike in Kryvyi Rih. Like she published like her tweets saying something like a missile strike on Kryvyi Rih devastating, not mentioning from where the missile has come, etc. And there was an outrage in Ukrainian Twitter who kept asking her, where did the missile come from? And she was trying like to be in line with the policy of Donald Trump and his administration, not naming, not blaming Russia. And then when she did it, she was fired. So it clearly shows that you may try to be in line with this administration as much as you want, you will not be spared for that. You will be punished anyway, sooner or later. So better say openly what you think, better say openly the truth. Don't try to pretend that there is no truth and that you can like maneuver around the limitations and through the limitations and keep your position. That is not the case.
Yeah, to me it looks like not even a trend, but to me personally, it looks like an agenda, a new communications agenda in the White House, which, if you saw, for example, different hearings in the Senate, talking to new officials assigned by Trump administration, they don't even have. I'm not sure if it's like about their courage, but when asked directly, do you agree that Russia invaded Ukraine? They go, well, it's, it's too hard to say. Too hard to say how to call it when tanks and troops of one country cross the border into a different country. There's much more than meets the eye, there's the question is much harder to answer than you can probably think. But we know that this strike happened shortly after the negotiations that took place in Moscow between the Russian terrorists and the US representatives. Do you think there is a connection between two events?
Well, I'm definitely sure, and we see this pattern. It's not something what has happened today for the first time. Every time Vladimir Putin and his team gets receives signals from the West that the West is ready for negotiations, Russia strikes Ukraine. That happens every time. And that is very understandable because Russia doesn't look at these negotiations or whatever, however it can be called, or whatever it can be called. It doesn't look at these negotiations as an invitation to dialogue. It looks or it assumes that these negotiations is a sign of weakness. Why should Russia keep the strikes down while the West demonstrates its weakness? Quite the opposite. While the West is weak, Russia sees it as an opportunity to hit Ukraine, to strike Ukraine, to impose harm on Ukraine. And that is exactly what we observe since years and years in Russia's behavior. The moment when the West demonstrates its decisiveness and its readiness to strike, Russia doesn't see it as an escalative development. Russia sees it as de-escalative development and keeps attacks down. But the moment when the West comes to Russia and says, "Oh, dear Vladimir, let's have a talk. You're a decent person. We don't want to harm you," Putin says, "Wow, great. Let's drink a vodka, Tavarish, and let's kill some more Ukrainians." Because you have just demonstrated me you are a weak person. You don't want to harm me. If you don't want to harm me, I can harm anyone because nobody will stop me. That is exactly when Witkoff came to Moscow in a totally submissive and self-offering form, and demonstrated his loyalty to Putin by keeping his palm close to his heart and almost saluting Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has understood it's his golden hour. He needs to grab the opportunity and strike Ukraine harder. That's how the Russians see it, and they feel encouraged. And it happened. It happened also. Like, I don't want to say once again. I don't want to say it's all Trump administration, because Biden administration demonstrated the same mistake, just like on another level, not so openly, not so blatantly, but they did the same. Like every time, like they called Moscow, or they spoke to Gerasimov or to other Russian bureaucrats, Russians felt encouraged.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me, do you have this feeling? Because this is something that I see all the time. I don't want to start conspiracies here on this channel, but literally what I see every single time after the negotiations, and especially after the Russian strikes, when Russians strike the energy infrastructure in Slovyansk, and literally the next day Trump goes, we have such a good progress with negotiations, with the peace talks with Russians, and then they strike the energy infrastructure in Dnipro, and Ukrainian authorities report that the energy infrastructure was hit literally by Russians who promised not to strike the energy infrastructure. And the next day, again, the Trump administration goes, the progress is so good. We have such good news coming from Russia regarding and then they hit the playground in Kryvyi Rih, killing children. And Trump goes, we reached such an enormous progress. We are so happy that Russians finally communicate. I think literally after this strike on Sumy, Trump, I don't know, he will be dancing from happiness because of such a big progress in negotiations. Do you have the same feeling as me, or I'm just imagining something?
I think Trump just doesn't care about what happens in Ukraine regarding civilians' death toll. It's just not his focus of interest. I think that's my pure assumption, but I think they play the very same game which the United States tried to play with Russia and before with Soviet Union for decades, like finding some sort of an equilibrium in sharing spheres of influence. And it's not about protecting Ukraine or destroying Ukraine. Ukraine just doesn't exist in this equation. And what Trump wants to achieve here is to secure his own personal interests, and to secure interests of his of businesses close to him. So that is practically what Russia offers to their allies, like North Korea or China before, and what obviously Russia offers to the United States now, which is of course brings the whole game to the next level when the United States suddenly appears on the same level relations to Russia like North Korea or China, which should be just insulting for any sane US American. But okay, that is the question which they should answer for themselves. But that is what Russia is doing from my perspective. They come to these nations and say, look, we have a problem with Ukraine and we can't defeat it alone. But you may join us and we will give you a share of it. Like you will profit from defeating Ukraine. Your soldiers will get experience on the battleground, which is extremely important for China nowadays, for example, as Chinese soldiers who have never fought a war since 1970s, during the war in Vietnam and in Cambodia. They now gather practical experience in the most modern and technological war, which is incredibly important for China. That's why China sends soldiers to Ukraine. They don't care if like half of them will die. Those who will not will come back to China with incredibly precious and valuable experience. That's why the Russians say to North Korea, give us your ballistic missiles. You will live test them against the most modern Western air defense systems. And when you will come to idea to hit Japan with your ballistic missiles with a nuclear warhead, or Seoul, or South Korea, you will know how to surpass Western air defense systems, Patriot, NASAMS, other systems. And that is extremely valuable experience for the North Koreans. They say, hell yeah, we will test our ballistic missiles against the West. It will cost us nothing. Maybe the Russians will even pay us for this. It's win-win. So now I think the Russians they want to sell Ukrainian territory to the United States, saying, "Look, you just tolerate what we do, and in exchange, on all territories we will have under our control in Ukraine, you will get like some concessions. You will get like some rights to exploit mineral resources, etc." And that is the way of thinking, which I think, and I am afraid, very much resonates with Trump's way of thinking. It's a purely colonialist model of the 19th century, like the European countries have divided Africa in the 19th century, end of 19th century, on the Berlin Conference, exactly as the Nazis and the Soviets have divided Central Europe in Stalin-Hitler pact. That is the way which Putin now, who is clearly an admirer of Adolf Hitler, offers to his potential allies in Beijing, in Pyongyang, in Tehran, and horrible dicto in Washington, D.C.
Makes sense to me. We have a commentary from Molly. She says, in America, we're now hearing that the attempted assassination and more were orchestrated by Ukraine, which basically explains a lot. If you have such amazing speakers as Tucker Carlson and Tim Pool and others supporting you as a president, of course, you will hear more of such fakes in the United States. Do we see the fall of the independent media in the US? How do you think? Sergey?
Wow, that's a tricky question. First, I'm not an expert in the U.S. media. I cannot say what is the development on the U.S. media landscape. What I can say and what we observe on social media, on Twitter, the X, on other platforms, we see the way of argumentation, of arguing, and the way of providing the opinion as a fact is so much horrifying. It's totally horrifying. And the biggest problem is that the people who literally got to the top of the political pyramid in the most powerful country in the world. And the United States is the most powerful country in the world, economically, militarily, culturally. The United States creates the world of ideas we live in, with its Hollywood, with the media, with the universities, etc. And people who rule this country now, when you open their social media accounts, you will say, it cannot be true. These people cannot get so high on this ladder. How could they get there? I would never hire a person with such crazy salad of ideas in their head to an assistant position. How could this person get to a position of the head of national intelligence or national security advisor, etc., etc.? And once again, it didn't start with Trump. Once again, it's not the problem is not Trump. He is, of course, the manifestation of the scale of this problem, but the problem has started much earlier. Just remember the national security advisor under Biden. who claimed all the way that a negotiation is the only way to talk to Russia, that Russia is undefeatable, that delivering weapons leads to escalation. So it's anti-scientific way of analyzing reality, claiming that what you wish to have is what it is, denying facts, trying to achieve a different result with an experiment you have sat for 100 times and have got one single result, the same every time, and you try to do it for 101st time in a hope that the result will be different. And that is what we had under Biden. And now, of course, it is more veered, it is more blatant, it is more aggressive, it is absolutely burlesque. But the vector of denying reality and claiming an opinion unsupported by any fact and contradicting any proven fact has been said much earlier.
I completely agree on that. Of course, we were enormously happy in Ukraine and grateful to the American people for sending us the weaponry and also the land lease signed in May by President Biden. But again, if we're talking to people like General Ben Hodges, who clearly state that Ukraine would have a much better position at the battlefield right now and more people would be saved, civilians and military, if Ukraine was provided with more weaponry and, which is even more important, timely, because we remember when Ukraine did not receive the necessary military supplies for like half a year because the conservatives and Trump couldn't decide, what to do with that bill. Still there is a problem, I believe, on the West among the decision makers with the understanding, and this understanding is emerging very, very slowly, but it emerges too slowly, in my opinion. The understanding that Russia is a global threat that should be dealt with. We have several more updates coming from Sumy. We know that the Sumy State University was also partially destroyed due to this attack, and in a different city, though, in Kharkiv, in the Kievsky district of Kharkiv city, the Russian UAV Molnia hit a kindergarten today. The building was damaged. We know that no one was injured or wounded because it's Sunday, but it was an attack on a kindergarten, literally. We can see this new pattern, which is not really new though, but we can see the growing Russian strikes on civilian targets, including restaurants, kindergartens, generally big city squares with plenty of people just minding their business. Do you think that this is a new Russian strategy, or Russians just decided to ramp up their atrocious attacks that they were conducting since 2022 and even earlier?
Well, I think that is that this fits very well into Russia's strategy and Russia's pattern. We know since years and years. Just remember Russia's strikes in Syria when Russia was supporting genocidal dictator Bashar al-Assad in his war against his own people. Russia was hitting exactly the targets like bakeries, hospitals, schools, kindergartens, water pumping stations, which are incredibly important in the arid climate, and. So Russia was aiming to make these cities unlivable, to harm the life, the very basic, the very the very basic fabric of humans' life, so much damage that people cannot live anymore in this city and just move away. And there was also, of course, the second level planning of the Russians. They wanted all these people to go to Europe, to support, to practically raise awareness of migration challenges, and to create support for far right parties, and to to put into these migration lines, to infiltrate these migration groups with their agents, who later could radicalize migrants or conduct terrorist attacks, etc. But the very first way, the very first step was to destroy the fabric of humans' lives. The same pattern we could observe in Chechnya in 1994-96, the first Chechen war, when the Russians were hitting social infrastructure of people, marketplaces, schools, etc. And just imagine, like you have mentioned this strike on a kindergarten in Sumy, which yes took place on Sunday, so nobody was hurt. But imagine, when people get this news, parents, that the kindergarten where their children play every day and meet their friends got hit by a Russian loitering munition, by a Russian attack drone. Uh, the room where your child was playing the is destroyed. The wardrobe where your child left their clothes, their jacket, and changed the boots after a rainy day is destroyed. The toys are smashed. uh this will give you a ring. Should I stay in this city? I'm afraid for the life of my child. And all other parents whose children's kindergartens were not hit, will ask themselves the same question: what should I do now? Is my child safe? Should I send this child to the kindergarten which is not hit yet tomorrow? And even if they do, even if they stay in the city, even if they send their child to the kindergarten, they will be in stress, and this will ruin their productivity, their quality of life, and that is Russia's evil strategy. And that's why I say Russia is a satanic death cult. And it's not an exaggeration. They really enjoy imposing death and suffering on people, and that is in quintessence satanic. They adore death, they adore suffering, and they find their ultimate reason for being alive to impose suffering and death to other people. And that is how they operate. That's why it makes no sense to have any negotiations with them, because you cannot negotiate with people who use the very basic idea of negotiations to impose more death and suffering on other people. And that is why Russia can be stopped only by force. And as long it is not being understood, this madness will continue. And I also, the last thing I wanted to mention, some people on Twitter say, should Ukrainians do the same with the Russian cities? Like, should Ukrainians also like just bomb like Russia's public events? And I say, no, Ukrainians will not, out of two very simple reasons. The first one, it is against Ukraine's moral and Ukraine's ideas of what is good and what is wrong. And the second is, there is no reason to do it. Like, really, Russians don't care about life of their people. They kill their own people for fun, like in prisons, in the army. Their parents beat their children to death. That is what they do. You will not scare Russians, especially Russians in Moscow, when you just kill 50 or 100 civilians in Belgorod or in Kaluga or whatever, they don't care. But what really impacts Russia is strikes on military infrastructure and economy, oil production, oil refineries, gas transition stations, airfields, airports. Like just destroy railroad bridges, and Russia will crack apart. And each part of this infrastructure has military meaning because Russia uses railways to transport troops. Russia uses airfields to supply their planes, etc. Just hit where Russia is vulnerable, and it makes no single violation of any international convention, and that will be enough. And here, Ukraine needs to get assisted by the West by providing Ukraine with means of destruction of these targets, what is absolutely in harmony with international law, with the UN Charter, with any convention Ukraine has signed, and it is what we as the Western nations are allowed to do according to the UN law, according to the UN Charter. We may assist Ukraine in its absolutely legal self defense. And within this self defense, Ukraine has right to strike military targets and targets with military meaning in Russia. And that is what we must provide Ukraine with: long range striking capacities.
I absolutely agree on that. We can see that Russians, of course, they have a lot of different munitions, long-range weapons, and ballistic missiles that they don't necessarily have to spend at Ukrainian strategic objects all at once, literally for the reason that they don't have enough launchers to spend them all at those targets. But of course, they also strike other targets like kindergartens and school and hospitals because they want to demoralize the population. But there is a much easier explanation: is that they want to stretch our air defense, because if our air defense are protecting specific strategic objects, knowing that Russians will be striking different cities as well, we also have to take some of those reserves and bring them to protect our cities. That is another very, very easy explanation, because we have to protect strategic facilities and lives as well. But we can see I would say two interesting tendencies here. One tendency is that there is a growing concern within the European Union, among the European countries, regarding the growing Russian threat. We can see a slow consolidation among the European nations and understanding that they should rely more on themselves. They should be raising more awareness against the potential Russian invasion of Europe, and we can see this growing understanding. On the other hand, we can see, I would say, rather growing carelessness in the media, especially in the United States media regarding Ukraine. We can see, again, shifting opinions. 2022, it was clear as a day that Russia invaded Ukraine, and it was a completely unprovoked and illegal invasion. 2025, we can see already people emerging with different ideas, infected by Russia Today, infected by Russia Today through people like Tim Pool, that Ukraine turns out it's like the biggest enemy of the world and things like that, and Americans should apologize to the poor
And
Russian people.
don't forget that famous Ukraine's corruption, which obviously prevented Ukraine first from being a member of NATO, then receiving military support, etc. This lie of Ukraine is so corrupt was spread through all European and Western countries. And then I say, when our German Chancellor Schröder worked for Gazprom, and Austrian Foreign Minister Kneisel worked for Rosneft, and French François Fillon, Foreign Minister at gas, also worked for Russian energy company. And in the ass, I don't even touch this question of corruption in the current administration. uh, and then Ukraine is suddenly so corrupt that we allow the Russians to genocide Ukraine because what? Because we want to implement some transparency procedures in Ukrainian public procurement, or what? That is weird. That's absolutely weird. And that was a lie, one of many lies. The second lie is the lie of Ukrainian nationalism or far right groups in Ukraine. We in Germany have Alternative for Germany, a right wing party, which is now, according to the polls, the strongest party in the country with 24%, 24.5, I guess, percent of support. And we don't say about, like, yeah, should Germany be expelled out of the NATO because Germany is a corrupt bear far right? No, of course not. But in the case of Ukraine, it was some sort of explanation why the Russians have a holy sacred right to genocide Ukrainian nation and to kidnap Ukrainian children and to rape Ukrainian women and to castrate Ukrainian prisoners of war, etc. Oh, because Ukraine is corrupt, you know. Yeah, I heard Ukraine is corrupt. That explains. Yeah, I understand Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, let's genocide Ukraine to help it get rid of corruption. Very, very Russian approach. To those people who are watching us right now, I would like to mention, by the way, that Russia, according to transparency.org, Russia is almost 40%, 40 positions lower than Ukraine in terms of transparency, which means that Russia is 40 positions higher than Ukraine in terms of corruption, making it pretty much the most corrupt country in Europe, and making it within, I believe, top 50 most corrupt countries of the world, which Ukraine is not part of. And
But
also,
even that doesn't give any country a right to shell Russian civilians. Even
yeah,
the fact that they're corrupt. No. Yeah, we just need to stop Russia's army from killing Ukrainians. That's so simple.
yes, absolutely. And the only way to stop it is not through negotiations, because negotiations are not even part of Russian strategy, but through supplies for Ukraine, and through helping Ukraine stop Russian invaders making their attempts of continuing their advances inefficient. But returning to the topic that we're discussing, I mentioned those two trends that we can see right now. In Europe, we can see cases of consolidation. And also in Europe and in the United States, we can see cases of like alternative points of view, which of course have right to exist. But on the other hand, if they're all fueled by Russian media and Russia Today, we know the purpose of those narratives. But still, how do you think, like based on your own experience as a political expert, what do you see will happen in the future? Which trend will prevail? Will Europe consolidate around helping Ukraine if we can see current dynamics preserved? Or we will see Ukraine being more and more ignored in the international media, and in the end, the public interest and public awareness towards Ukraine will decrease. What's your opinion?
Well, I'm not sure if if I'm not speaking now from the position of wishful thinking, which I cannot exclude, because I have very clear point of view of what is right, what is wrong, and my loyalty is on the side of Ukraine and Ukraine's fight against genocidal Russia's war. So of course I have some ideas what would be good for the world, including my country, Germany. Because I think that support for Ukraine is ultimately in Germany's interest, and Russia's defeat is in Germany's basic interest, because Russia has spent so much time and money and creativity to destroy our political sanity, to infiltrate our political elites, academic elites, journalists, business elites, just to destroy us. It is in our interest that Russia stops to exist and stops to sabotaging our way of life. But I think, having said all that and understanding that my analysis can be biased, I think that there is no way for Europe except of supporting Ukraine. Also, very simple reason: Europe is looking for its way to be truly independent and being an actor. And for a longer time, while the US was our strong ally and providing us with a lot of security, that is true. Here, I can agree with Donald Trump. Europe was a free ticket rider in this security construct. The US was providing us with security, we used it. But and during that time, the idea of strategic autonomy and of like decoupling Europe military means from the US was a more of a destructive way, a more of undermining transatlantic solidarity. But today, there is no such thing as transatlantic solidarity. Donald Trump has clearly proclaimed it for that, saying he wants to annex Danish territory. He wants to impose payments on Europe. He wants to tariff Europe. He would not protect Europe if Russia attacks Europe, NATO countries. So there is no such thing as transatlantic solidarity anymore. And under these conditions and these circumstances, it is not a treason of transatlantic solidarity anymore to urge for more European autonomy and independency and subjectivity. So now the European leaders like Sunak, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, or French President Emmanuel Macron, or the other leaders, including the UK, by the way, they can unite with way more moral right to decouple Europe in militarily political decisions from the US than it was possible like 1 year ago or 2 years ago. And in this new constellation, Ukraine turns into a very important military asset. Ukraine turns into the key element of European security. Ukraine is not a burden, has never been a burden, by the way. Ukraine is an asset, a very precious asset, a nation with the strongest army in Europe, with the strongest national spirit, with a clear loyalty to the values of free world, democracy, freedom, the way of life we value so much, with personal freedom, with political freedom, with independency, with the strong personal will not to be subjugated, not to be a slave, not to get occupied, rather die than live in unfreedom. And this Ukraine can give us all what we are lacking: the bravery, the moral stance, the decisiveness, the strength to stand up and to fight for what is good against what is wrong. And I think that from this perspective, Germany, and we see already this development, and I think we can talk if we have today in the evening, if we have another live discussing the the new coalition in Germany and the new political reality in Germany. We can discuss more of this topic. In this constellation, Germany will provide Ukraine with a lot of help, much more than under Chancellor Scholz. Also, because we understand that it is in our interest, and we can survive as the European Union, as a European part of NATO, only if we unite with Ukraine in this war and not if we let Ukraine get smashed further. I'm very sorry it hasn't happened 3 years ago. And it was a clear mistake, but it's not late to repay the debt.
I completely agree with you, and I'm really sorry that it didn't happen in 2014. Actually, we just had a comment in the chat that the Europe should have woken up in 2014, but it didn't happen. There's another comment. Stop blaming United States for Europe being a pussy. Which, again, I don't know what to disagree with in this commentary. The biggest problem was that in Ukraine, we understand Russian language. And when Russians speak on their TV channels, on their national television about the Ruski Mir, about the fascist ideology of the Russian world that should recapture all the territories that belong to the Soviet Union, that were occupied by the Soviet Union and things like that, and that the mighty Russian Empire should swallow Ukraine, Belarus, and piece of Poland, and return to Eastern Germany and things like that. We understood what it meant, and we could realize what was the threat, and people further west from Poland, I would say, they didn't watch Russian television, they didn't care, and they would not basically pay attention to this. That's why in Ukraine we were much more prepared, and we knew what the Russian atrociousness was about, how it looked like. We could tell from Russia invading, again, Ukraine's, I would say, neighbors, because Georgia is not really far from Ukraine. It's just we share the same sea, and from other places, again, Abkhazia, again, Pridnestrovia, the Transnistria. So Ukrainians were more prepared. Ukrainians knew what was going on, and they knew what to expect. And of course, all this mind virus called the Ruski Mir, it wasn't aimed at people in the European Union. It wasn't aimed at people in the United States. The main target audience of Ruski Mir was, of course, Russia and the countries that were bordering Russia that could understand the language and probably find some kind of support there, like they did, for example, in Crimea or in Donbass. There were quite a few individuals who would go to the Revolution of Dignity to fight against the protesters, and later we saw them wearing Russian flags, Russian patches, and fighting against Ukrainian army as well as part of the Russian hybrid army. So here I completely agree with your point. I wonder, will we see any I would say more serious steps before summer, because Russia will keep striking Ukraine, and we will see more strikes, I believe, on the Ukrainian civil infrastructure. Will we see any serious steps coming from the European countries, European allies, towards improving Ukraine's ability to defend itself, besides the military aid that is coming to Ukraine? And I mean probably more sanctions, probably more support in terms of intelligence. Will we see some kind of raise, some kind of grow, increased, as the word, in terms of Ukraine's support? How do you think?
Oh, well, I think it is indeed what we see. The support for Ukraine, and we have seen it many times. It came in too small scale and too late. And every time it came, you could say, okay, what much larger would have been the result and the impact of this support if this package would have come like 6 months ago, 12 months ago. Like, just imagine all this air defense and Leopards and Storm Shadows would have been sent to Ukraine in March 22 or in January 22 as a prevention measure, right? And that is exactly the case. That's exactly the case. Still, it is better than nothing. And unfortunately, the world is as it is. The West was so much delusioned, so much intoxicated by the Russian lies, and the Russians have invested decades of their work into making our elites incapable for fight, like intoxicating our academic elites, our political elites, bribing, spreading false narratives, etc., etc. And yes, one can also say Ukraine was not clear enough with what Ukraine wanted to say, and I also wonder if Ukrainian society in whole before 2014 was ready to accept that reality. Like, before Russia's first invasion of Ukraine, majority of Ukrainians said Russia is a friendly nation. Even until 22, a half of Ukrainians, according to polls, said that Russia is a friendly nation. So what can we expect from German people, or from, I don't know, French people or American people? They say, okay, Russia somewhere far away. We don't know. I hope the Russians love their children too. All this bullshit. No, Russians don't love their children. They don't even love themselves. They love power. They love violence, but they don't love anyone. And now we are experiencing a very painful transition into new understanding of the world and into new reality where, unfortunately, international treaties don't work, and we must be ready to fight and to die if necessary to protect our values. And the bad part of this message is that the Ukrainians pay for this transformation with their lives and with lives of their children and dear ones, and we pay until now mostly only with our economic losses. But it can change if Ukraine fails to protect us, and if we don't support Ukraine much enough, and if Russians will prevail in Ukraine, then we will start pay for our sins with our lives and with lives of our children here in Germany and in other countries, and I don't want to witness it.
I totally agree. Again, the changes that we have a comment in the chat saying that what kind of Pearl Harbor moment in Europe should we have in order to understand that Russia is a threat, and we will not have a Pearl Harbor, we will have an Anschluss rather than Pearl Harbor, I believe, because Russia utilizes soft power that is as good as, if not better than, Russian combat force to reach their goals in places like Europe, in places like the United States. And that is one of the reasons why we are speaking today. So, Sergei, thank you so much for joining my channel today. Thank you so much for letting me speaking on your channel as well. And my dear friends, later today we will talk more about what happened in Sumy. Also, we will be joined by several more people. I believe the stream will start around 8 p.m. Berlin time. I will keep you updated. Sergei, is there anything you would like to say to our viewers?
No, like just this broadcasting which you have watched now, and thank you for your time and for your questions and for your commentaries. This was practically out of two reasons. First, the terrible strike in Sumy, which we could not left unmentioned. And it was important to raise attention to this strike. And but we planned the evening broadcasting, which will take place 8 p.m. Central European time, Berlin time, and 7 p.m. London time, GMT time. And what we had now, like we have tested practically live tested the technical things for all the broadcasting, so it will work, etc. We will have amazing guests tonight. Don't miss these broadcasts, and we will discuss many things, including Germany's new coalition, including Germany's new government, including the situation with Steve Witkoff, and we will continue raising donations for the 4th Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine, where Operator Starsky served as a soldier. And the guys from the 4th Brigade have addressed us and said, guys, please, 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 we need drones. We need drones to save lives, to fulfill our tasks. Please raise donations for drones. And we have said, yes, of course. And we are continuing to raise donations for the drones of the 4th Brigade, Rubish of the National Guard of Ukraine. You can find a donation link under this video. If you watch it on YouTube, in the description of the video. If you watch it on X, you will see it in the commentary left by the European Resilience Initiative Center, bank account data and PayPal data. If you donate from Germany, you are eligible for tax deduction. If you donate to 200 euro or more, just the European Resilience Initiative Center team, and you will get a tax deduction certificate. It is acknowledged by the German state as humanitarian support for Ukraine, drones which save lives. And yes, watch us tonight at 8 p.m. Central European time, 9 p.m. Kiev, 7 p.m. London, and I guess 2 p.m. Eastern time. I guess 2 p.m. Eastern time, but here I'm not so sure. Stay strong, stand with Ukraine, and Slava Ukraini.
Heroям Slava. My dear friends, thank you so much for watching. Big thanks to all the supporters and members of this channel, as well as our dear moderators. We'll see you later, and as always, be safe.